Gravity is an unyielding, relentless force that all things are bound to. Since the dawn of humanity, we have been attempting to find ways to bend it to our will, such as aviation and space travel, but as long as we are bound to this planet, we cannot escape its grasp, and so we always have to plan around it. Gravity ensures that if you are knocked off of your feet, you fall down. It is as inescapable and as guaranteed as time itself. In art and fiction, however, we can play with the very laws of gravity itself, scoffing at its supposed chokehold on us, and fantasizing about defying it altogether. Recently, I played through a couple of games about a superhero that can bend gravity to her will. Over here, it was called Gravity Rush, and it had been on my radar since the PlayStation Vita's launch. It wouldn't be until after the Vita's slow decline, the launch of the game's sequel on PlayStation 4, the shuttering of that game's online services, and the closure of Sony's Japan studio, which housed the team that developed Gravity Rush, when I would finally purchase both games and give them a shot. And I fell in love. If I were to summarize what makes these games so great, I would say that they carry the exhilaration and satisfaction achieved in a superhero action-adventure game through both their mechanics and structure, with all of the flourishes and consideration for setting and characterization intrinsic to Japanese shonen manga, as well as the artistry and socio-political awareness of a Miyazaki film, all led by a tremendously lovable protagonist. Since I've decided that I am going to continue to make whatever I want, and seeing as January is a more relaxed month on YouTube, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about a series that deeply affected me. My appreciation for Gravity Rush evolved into a deep affection as I played both games. I went from merely appreciating the game's tone, setting, and gameplay on a surface level with the first game, to becoming extremely passionate about every element that went into creating this universe upon playing Gravity Rush 2. I don't consider either of these games masterpieces, I'd temper your expectations going into them, but the things they get right are so good that I couldn't help but love them. I now consider myself a lifelong fan of art director and character designer Shunsuke Saito for his work on both games. I am a huge proponent of the series' originality, the sequel's themes and how they tie into its world design and gameplay, and I now consider Kat to be one of my all-time favorite protagonists. Even if you've never played Gravity Rush or don't own a PlayStation system, I hope you walk away from this video with a newfound appreciation for the artists that brought this world to life. I'm Liam Triforce, and this is how I fell in love with Gravity Rush. The story of Gravity Rush begins with director Keiichiro Toyama, director of the original Silent Hill, who conceived the original idea for Gravity Rush even before that game was created. His work on horror games continued in the 2000s with the Siren series, which he directed while working at Sony's Japan studio. All the while, ideas for this gravity-based game floated around in his head. Toward the end of the decade, as Siren Blood Curse was nearing completion for PlayStation 3, horror games were experiencing a decrease in revenue and popularity. This is also why Resident Evil pivoted towards a more action-oriented focus in order to stick around back then, and why Silent Hill pretty much fell off the face of the earth. This inspired him to go back to that idea, that had been lying dormant for years, and finally make it a reality. One thing I've noticed about Keiichiro Toyama's games is that they are all centered around something that feels wholly unique. Silent Hill was defined by the town it took place in, as well as the influence it took from psychological horror. Though its gameplay borrowed from the framework set by Resident Evil, its town was groundbreaking and influenced horror games for years to come. Siren, though not influential in the same way, was defined by its sight-jacking mechanic, something I've never experienced before in a game. Each mission places you in a small area, often obscuring your vision with fog or darkness, and you need to take advantage of the fact that you can see through everyone else's eyes in order to plan a safe route. If you die, you have to start the mission all over again. It's an incredibly tense game due to those stakes, but it also encourages you to get good at using sight-jacking to outsmart the enemies and stay safe. Gravity Rush is no different, and it also allowed for Toyama to prove himself outside of horror. The game was originally developed for the PlayStation 3. Much like Ueda's work with Japan Studio on Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian, a concept trailer was created in order to guide development and solidify a vision for the game. You can feel the influence of French and Belgian artists such as Jean Giraud even in this trailer, and the world of Gravity Rush would be heavily informed by his style, though its tone and technology would define it as something of its own, something more lighthearted and friendly. Development on PS3 would not last long though. Toyama learned of the Vita's gyroscope system while the console was still under wraps, and quickly saw the potential for applying the gyroscope to Gravity Rush's gameplay. Development was shifted to the PlayStation Vita shortly thereafter, which proved to be difficult for the team. For one thing, the Vita's specifications fluctuated throughout Gravity Rush's development. The team initially expected its power to be comparable to the PS3, which ended up not being the case at all. I mean, Gravity Rush is quite blurry even for a Vita game, and that low resolution ended up being a necessity in order to render this big world, and keep the game running smoothly. On top of that, the game was announced to be targeting the Vita's launch window, all while the team were trying to optimize the game for hardware they were struggling to grasp. Due to technological and time constraints, much of the intended story had to be cut, though it would later be told in Gravity Rush 2. In early prototypes for the game, you can catch glimpses of characters that would appear in the second game, from side quest characters to a character from the game's final chapter. At the time, there was no guarantee they would be able to tell the rest of that story beyond this one game, which must have been frustrating. This resulted in Gravity Rush feeling more episodic than I think they intended, but I don't entirely see that as a bad thing. If anything, the original game still feels distinct, especially compared with its sequel, a game that goes big and does everything that it possibly can. I appreciate the reserved nature of the first game in hindsight. In spite of its troubled development, Gravity Rush proved to be one of the most important games in the Vita's early life. It was one of the most unique, fully featured games for the system, and considering the sharp decline in adoption of the console throughout its first year, and its resulting niche placed in the industry, it sold quite well. Thankfully, it was salvaged from the Vita by Blue Point Games as Gravity Rush Remastered in 2015 for the PlayStation 4. This was how I first played the game. Let's examine Cat's debut title. Now that I have the context of the sequel, this opening shot of the apple tree in front of the rock spires was clearly meant to foreshadow Cat's origins. Nothing else in the game looks like this place, with the apple falling from the sky and the leitmotif that comes in shortly after, both meant to symbolize Cat falling into this unfamiliar world, and be a direct nod to Sir Isaac Newton's famous revelation. Though the theme's emotional weight isn't apparent until you play the second game, its descending melody is the perfect way to sell just how delightful this apple that descended upon us truly is. The first few missions of Gravity Rush have players slowly getting accustomed to the game's controls, camera, and mechanics. And though this might seem a bit slow, I found it to be necessary. Mastering Cat's abilities is an art that takes time, with mechanics and a control scheme as unique and unwieldy as this. I also found that the game mitigates the simplicity of these missions through its incredible amount of charm. For one thing, your immediate lack of knowledge over the world you find yourself in makes it much easier to identify with Cat, who contrasts most amnesiac characters in fiction because she doesn't dwell on where she came from or how she is going to get out. People are unkind and unwilling to trust her, but as soon as she sees someone in need, she has this instinctual desire to help them. Her upbeat nature is infectious, and her inner monologues offer her own fun and relatable commentary on any given situation. But what I loved most about her was her ability to turn a set of bad circumstances into something fun. After wondering how she's supposed to get by, she falls into an open manhole and tumbles into the sewer. She looks around at all of the sewer pipes and decides to go house shopping. The mission that follows even has you looking for furniture for your new home, all the while teaching you the stasis field mechanic. It's ridiculous, but Cat's positive attitude about the whole thing is contagious. After collecting all of this furniture, she begins making this sewer pipe her new home. She tries to take a lamp out of the street, but ends up getting scolded by the police, and then she just moves on, carrying her bag of stuff with her. It's so cute. Kat's sewer pipe house ends up being one of the strongest symbols of her personality, as well as her ability to turn a rough situation into an opportunity. At this moment, I knew that Kat would be a character I'd love. She was both a driving force in the narrative and the comic relief at the same time. She's not overbearing with her commentary, it's as if the player's own internal monologue about how weird and standoffish these characters can be is being echoed by her. Her outlook on the world is cute, but it's not naive. She understands the potential dangers facing it, and she chooses to make it an easier place to live in for everyone, all the while maintaining a positive attitude. On top of that, she still very much behaves like a person. Her powers never go to her head. It also helps that her gravity shifting powers come from her guardian cat, whom she names Dusty. That said, she is still more than capable on her own, with her observable grasp on martial arts during ground-based combat, and her acrobatic capabilities. Throughout the game, she gains more and more respect from the people of Hexaville for her selfless actions. As she defeats the Nevi that torment people and thwarts Alias's plans, people go from hating shifters to looking to them for assistance. People start to stand up for her. Kat herself is affectionately referred to as the Gravity Queen. Even the military asks for her cooperation, but she declines and chooses to remain independent due to her disagreement with their methods. Even though she has no idea who she is or where she came from, she carves an identity for herself simply because being kind and positive is intrinsic to who she is. Let's talk about Kat's design as well. Kat's appearance came about from a desire for a unique protagonist that had a universal appeal, both in the West and in a Japanese market. Naoko Sato, co-writer for the original Gravity Rush and monster designer on the original Silent Hill, spoke at the 2012 Computer Entertainment Developers Conference in Japan about a fear of making Gravity Rush feel too Japanese. She mentioned that she thought the cute female protagonist, fictional language and city, and art style would all hurt the game's performance outside of Japan, which, to be fair, it kind of did, whereas Japan would find all of these elements familiar and endearing. Even the name overseas, Gravity Rush, is more of a catch-all for the game's action elements than it is an embodiment of the game's world. The Japanese title, Gravity Days, is a double entendre that both sells the dizzying nature of gameplay and the days that Kat spends in this new world, accustoming herself to her newfound powers. From these considerations, the team settled on a young woman that didn't appear too strong, but rather fittingly agile considering the nature in which she attacks enemies, like a ninja according to them. They wanted her to seem mysterious so that players couldn't easily discern her origins, all the while still being cute, a compromise between both philosophies. Kat's design, along with the rest of the main cast, would be finalized by Shunsuke Saito. Now there's a lot to be said about his work on this game's characters. Raven is this game's other gravity shifter, and she acts as a rival to Kat throughout most of the game, attempting to fight back against her at every turn due to misinformation concocted by Hexaville's mayor. Her design contrasts Kat, appearing more mature and mysterious, and she carries a bleak outlook on the world around her in her design and personality. She kind of feels like Shadow the Hedgehog if he was a beautiful woman, and not just because of her color scheme, it's true to her nature. Sid, a member of the police force in Hexaville, becomes one of Kat's closest allies. He's super handsome, and his design feels grounded compared to everyone else. He also happens to be the one to give Kat her name, based on her relationship with Dusty. Then there's Unica and Permet of the military, the freakish dual nature of Cyania's character, which we'll get into later, Aki and her puppet friend Pandora, and Alias, wearing a suit and tie, and his giant mechanical helmet and black tassels resembling a Nevi. All great character designs that further keep discovery of this world fun, but Kat, unsurprisingly, remains my favorite design of them all. Her blonde hair is striking and her scarf is elegant, but they aren't just there to look pretty. They are also physical gameplay elements, as they fall and sway in the direction that gravity is currently shifted in. If you ever find yourself disoriented and you don't know which way is up, you can always look to her hair and scarf for direction. Coupled with her personality, I think it's difficult not to fall in love with this character, and my love was only strengthened by her portrayal in the game's sequel. Equal to the quality of this game's character design is its environmental art. As mentioned, the game draws heavy inspiration from Franco-Belgian artists, and it is rendered in a particular way that makes it feel like a comic book come to life. The strong outlines and shadows, the narrow, focused color palette in each area, the way the draw distance renders faraway buildings as if they are background sketches, as well as the sort of science-fantasy hybrid observable in its setting, which was a necessity for certain characters to be able to keep up with Kat as she zips through the air. It also gives way to a vibrant city setting, with each district feeling completely distinct. Hexaville is made up of 4 districts. First, there's Old Noir, which feels like the historic part of town, kind of like Old Montreal or Greenwich Village, just as examples of places I've actually visited. Its structure also lends itself well to the gameplay of Gravity Rush, as there's a degree of verticality that might seem impractical for everyday life, but it is the perfect playground for Kat. Then there's Pléjune, the entertainment district. Bathed in hues of blue and purple, this place is characterized by its nightlife, its sights, and the university just down the street, Arquebus Academy. Wait, what? Who thought it was a good idea to put a nightlife district meters away from a school? Then there's Industria, the industrial district, which fittingly has a color scheme that makes you feel like you're breathing in chemicals that you really shouldn't be. Finally, there's the downtown district of Venda Center, featuring a plethora of buildings and skyscrapers, which are a tried and true way of empowering players in a superhero setting. All of this is strengthened by Kohei Tanaka's score for the game, whom you might know for scoring the One Piece anime. Speaking of feeling like a superhero, let's talk about Kat's abilities for a moment. The hook of this game is, of course, the ability to shift gravity in any direction you like. You can use this to stand on various surfaces, as well as to simply fall in any direction in order to make it to your objective and collect things, which is inherently a lot of fun. The camera often tilts and shifts with Kat's trajectory in order to keep track of where you're going, as well as to help players reorient themselves when they find themselves at a strange angle. Recentering the camera is paramount when attempting to not throw up while playing this game, but even then, it might not help. A casualty of this game being on the Vita is how closely the camera seems to hug Kat when she's flying through the air. On a small screen, this isn't nearly as much of an issue. In fact, it helps. This is what the game looks like when you're playing it on the Vita. You can see how much less of an issue it is on a portable console. When you're playing it on a big television, it can be nauseating. Gravity Rush 2, being built specifically for the PS4, would largely alleviate this issue. Even so, I found that focusing on where you want Kat to be, regardless of what direction you're facing, or which way gravity is shifted in, is a great way to grow accustomed to the gameplay. Kat's primary method of dealing damage is the gravity kick, which is such a satisfying move to center a game around. Though Kat can deal damage with her ground combos, the gravity kick is usually the best option. Once you're hovering over an enemy, you can hold square to home in and crash into them with a kick. You can perform kicks in rapid succession too, but the amount of distance between the start of your kick and the end point determines the damage you deal. Even so, hopping between weak points with the gravity kick is such a cool feeling. It's so snappy and responsive. Even if I have to dodge in midair, I can simply reorient myself and move in for the kill. It never gets old. But you're not uncontested while doing this, as there are plenty of different Nevi with different methods of attack that require different approaches. Armored Nevi, Nevi with multiple weak points, Nevi that move super fast, Nevi that throw projectiles at you, the works. To compensate, Kat has different abilities too. One of her most powerful abilities is her Stasis Field, which allows you to launch a set number of nearby objects at enemies. Think of it like the gravity gun from Half-Life 2, except you can hold more than one thing, and the projectiles you throw lock onto enemies. Though you have to be standing still, and in the immediate vicinity of objects in order for the stasis field to work, it is still a novel use of the game's gravity concept. It allows you to deal damage to fast enemies with more accuracy, and it would only get more powerful in the sequel. Each rift plane also introduces you to a unique special move for Kat. The first is the Spiral Claw, which homes in on each weak point in front of you one by one, and it's one I tend to use a lot. When it lands, it's an awesome damage dealer. The second is the Gravity Typhoon, which allows you to lob a ton of projectiles in rapid succession. which is excellent not just for taking out multiple smaller enemies, but also for dealing damage in general at a distance. The third is the micro black hole, which, as you'd expect, creates a black hole that absorbs and kills enemies nearby. Extremely powerful and guarantees death to most enemies in its range. Cat can also use the gravity slide to slide along surfaces quickly, and magnetize to whatever surface she comes in contact with. By default, these powers are not going to be enough to get you by when you face the game's bosses and tougher challenges. That's why Gravity Rush has an open world for you to explore in between its missions. It's not a massive, sprawling world or anything like that. It's a small but thematically rich world with gems for you to collect using your abilities, and it compensates for your primary method of traversal through its size and design. Gems are used to upgrade each of your abilities, from shifting speed to your gravity gauge, which governs how long you are able to shift, your stasis field, your special moves, health, strength, and so on. There are a ton of gems from across Hexaville for you to collect, and just the mere act of doing this is satisfying. There were countless times across both this game and the sequel where I would postpone all other activities and just collect gems, because Cat is so much fun to control. And just being able to do whatever I want and move around as I please in order to rack up my gems is appealing. As you gain access to new districts in Hexaville, there are more gems to collect, and their value increases to scale with the difficulty of the game, and the cost of upgrades. By the time I had unlocked Venda Center, I was spending all of my time just hunting for gems and soaring through the city skyscrapers, and I was having the time of my life. Technically, it's not the fastest way to earn gems, as getting a gold medal in the challenges always nets you a massive amount, but doing both is a great way to max out your stats quickly. The challenges, by the way, test you on all sorts of abilities, defeating as many Nevi as possible within the time limit, seeing how well you can gravity slide, throwing things into a stasis field. Pretty much any skill that you are asked to improve across the main game is tested in a focused, hardcore challenge. And due to how intense these challenges can get, and due to the variety of skills tested, I had zero qualms with achieving the gold medal on all of them. I was obsessed with every facet of this game's gameplay, and the game rewarded me for attempting to sharpen my skills. To me, if a game is inherently fun to play when you are just doing something as integral to it as moving around, I think it might be pretty damn good. It's something that sold people on Super Mario 64 back in the day, and it continues to be a focal point for games built on solid movement. Keiichiro Toyama specifically cited the structure and upgrade system of Crackdown as inspiration for Gravity Rush, and if you've played both games, it's easy to understand why. For context, Crackdown is an absolutely ridiculous sandbox game where you are tasked with cleaning up the streets, which basically means you go around slaughtering gang members as a superpowered cop. You might roll your eyes at the concept, but the game leans into it being absurd as satire. As soon as you leave the headquarters, it is a war zone. There's bullets flying everywhere, people are screaming, and you jump like 50 feet in the air, and you have power armor like in Halo. Once you look past its satirical exterior, you'll realize that the game truly succeeds at its ambitious structure. You can beat the game however you like, defeating the kingpins in any order. You have complete freedom to level up your skills by attempting challenges, fighting enemies in specific ways, and collecting orbs that increase your expertise in certain areas. As far as sandbox design goes in an open world, this is the kind of thing I love. Obviously, Gravity Rush has a linear story to tell, so it doesn't give you this level of freedom, but it leans into the notion that players should be able to use these abilities freely, and that the mere act of doing so in order to get stronger should be fun. To me, Gravity Rush's structure and mechanical design reminds me more of Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube. To this day, it remains my favorite Spider-Man game, primarily because it takes that philosophy of strengthening your protagonist through your own mastery of the game's mechanics, be it by clearing challenges, attempting races, or my personal favorite, finding all of the secret tokens. But it also has swinging so mechanically deep, so difficult yet satisfying to master, that I could accomplish absolutely nothing in it and just swing around for an hour, and still walk away satisfied with the time I spent in the game. Maybe I just felt like a child playing with toys while moving around in these kinds of games, but I see that as high praise. There's a fight later on in Gravity Rush with Unica, which breaks out due to a disagreement over how the mayor and the military are harnessing Nevi to create a super weapon. It's a great way of demonstrating Cat's independence and forward thinking when it comes to protecting Hexaville, but it's the gameplay of this fight that I wanted to talk about specifically. Unica's abilities are comparable to Cat's in how she can fly around and charge into things, so the entire fight ends up feeling like something out of Dragon Ball Z. It reminds me of how I used to smash my action figures together, pretending that they're clashing in midair at high speeds like Goku and Cell did. The fact that a game could resurrect a feeling like that, and make me feel like a kid again, all through solid mechanical design, is something that I have to commend. This feeling extends to Cat's abilities across the entire game, by the way, as she is just so much fun to control. Unica is meant to feel like a high-speed test of your ability to track enemies with the gravity kick, and I feel like I earned my victory against her. There are objectives that go beyond the scope of the main missions and challenges too, and they come in the form of the rare Nevi that you can find across the game's 3 rift planes. The creator Gade takes you to these ethereal realms by lifting up his robes. Naturally, I mean, how else would you get there? Here is where you can master Cat's 3 special moves, and in order to progress, you'll need to clear out every enemy on each little planetoid or platform. They're fun missions on their own, and they allow you to bring each segmented portion of Hexaville back together, reuniting the townsfolk with their loved ones. The Mirage also introduces a twist, wherein you are only able to shift gravity for a short period of time due to Cat's powers being weakened. Usually these places are full of gems too, and the enemies are strong and plentiful, but in addition to the primary objective, you can come back later and explore to find additional gems and even optional bosses. First there's this little Nevi, hidden inside of this derelict tower. It's tiny, so what's the big deal? Well, it has an ungodly amount of health. You better hope you've upgraded the strength of your attacks as much as possible, or you'll be here a while. In my case, I made sure I acquired the fully upgraded gravity kick, the one with the golden aura. It feels amazing to use, and it feels like it can wear down even the toughest of enemies. Once it finally goes down, it spawns an attractive amount of gems for your trouble. Each of the rare Nevi do this once defeated, and it never gets old to watch my gem counter skyrocket. The rare Nevi in the Inferno plane is essentially a beefier version of the buff Nevi, only it hits like a truck every time it lands a punch. And the rare Nevi in the Mirage plane? This thing is harder to fight than the final boss. You'd better make sure you're prepared before you take this thing on. It flies around at high speeds, it fires fairly accurate projectiles at a rapid pace, and it takes a long time to finally die. But you know what? I beat it on my first try for this video. You just have to fall into a rhythm of dodging, staying close, and using your gravity kick with patience, as well as using your special meter when the time is right. It is the ultimate test over your grasp of Cat's abilities, and I love it for that. I bring these bosses up because they are a testament to just how much fun I had with Cat's abilities. It is so fun to shift gravity on its own that I got the Platinum Trophy in this game without a second thought. The game isn't long either. On both of my 100% playthroughs of this game, I achieved everything in about 10 hours, and that's including DLC, which we'll talk about later. I'm also always down for challenge runs and optional bosses that happen to be tougher than the final boss of a game, as I've gone on about them in my Zelda retrospectives, so I was more than happy to test my grasp on an already phenomenal set of powers. That said, if you asked me what my favorite moments were in Gravity Rush aside from these optional tasks, I'd say it would be the moment-to-moment stuff in the central missions. Whether that means Cat reuniting Newt and Echo, and the brief crush she develops on Newt, Cat and Sid celebrating her victory over Alias, or the many other ways Cat manages to prove herself, Cat clawed her way into my heart, just as she clawed into the hearts of everyone in Hexaville. Gravity Rush creates a world that I didn't want to leave, primarily due to Cat, but also due to just how much fun it is to play. That said, the game's overarching narrative still has tricks up its sleeve in the second half. At some point, Cat meets a woman that claims to have dropped something important, and it fell beneath the gravity storm below town. This takes Cat on a journey through the World Pillar, which is unfathomably tall. While you are inside of the World Pillar, you won't be able to shift gravity, so you have to steer yourself to collect gems and avoid enemies while being completely helpless. You'll weave in and out of the World Pillar as you descend, fighting enemies and collecting gems along the way. and the length of this segment shows just how tall the world pillar is, and by extension, how far Kat fell when she landed in Hexaville. Toward the end of your descent, you'll run into Raven, who is intent on stopping Kat this time. Your final fall has you dodging Raven's attacks as best you can, and just when you think it's over, a hand of darkness reaches out and smashes into the platform Kat is standing on, sending her plummeting into the darkness below. When Kat awakens, she finds herself captured by a group of kids, and though things seem bleak at first, Kat reunites with Dusty, fends off some Nevi all over this strange lost city, and comes to understand their situation. These children fell beneath the world pillar long ago, though it seems that time passes differently down here. The city is made from the scrap that fell beneath the world pillar, and these children are waiting in vain for their parents to come rescue them. Naturally, the game has gems and challenges for you to sink your teeth into down here, but this area is designed for the purpose of a couple of important plot revelations. For one thing, Raven reluctantly teams up with Kat when a giant Nevi attacks the city, which the children have dubbed Nushi, and it is strongly implied that Raven has some connection to the lost children. This would later be explained in the Arc of Time DLC for Gravity Rush 2. Second, Cyanea is revealed to be one of the world's creators, and she takes Kat on a journey to learn more about how to save the children, and her past. This leads to a unique sequence in which you need to solve problems by shifting gravity at designated points. You'll be placed in a completely blank space with an odd gradient surrounding you, and as you solve these problems, Cyanea will speak cryptically about Kat's past. It's a great context for which to consider gravity-based problems, especially the more complex platforming scenarios, like this sandbox made up of white blocks at the end. But I wouldn't blame you if you didn't process Cyanea's words at first. She speaks of how Kat felt burdened by her purpose above the world pillar, and how she cast her memories aside. The final stretch of dialogue, however, is the most foreboding. She goes on and on about how death and the end are inescapable for all things, and after confronting a rather creepy projection of Kat, completely encased in ice, she turns around and is greeted by a castle, and a royal-looking woman that bears a striking resemblance to her. Then she awakens. If you want any answers as to what the hell just happened, well, unfortunately, you won't find them in this game. As mentioned earlier, Gravity Rush's full narrative was cut short due to the game having to meet the deadline of the PlayStation Vita's launch window. The narrative sort of fast-tracks itself from here as a result, leaving many questions unanswered. This is sort of a double-edged sword inherently. On one hand, we received Gravity Rush 2 as a result, which not only wraps up every remaining plot thread from the first game, but it also has compelling ideas of its own. On the other hand, had this game told a complete story, including Kat's origins, I have to wonder how the second game would have looked, if it would have happened at all. Either way, let's wrap things up. Together with Raven, you'll take down Nushi a second time, only this time it has multiple weak points and projectiles, and it is the toughest enemy you've had to fight up to this point in the game. It feels like a trial run of that final rare Nevi I discussed earlier, which is fantastic for conditioning players to tougher challenges. After this, Kat is separated from Raven and the kids as they fly through the rift on the Ark, and she ends up ascending the world pillar on her own. From here she discovers that a year has passed in Hexaville, confirming that time does indeed flow much slower beneath the pillar. Kat finds herself in a town she barely recognizes as the military has put it under martial law, Sid has joined with the military, and Unica's superhuman capabilities through militaristic technology have all led to Kat feeling somewhat obsolete after everything that has happened. This whole sequence doesn't last long though, as Kat soon discovers that the scientist she helped out for his research was actually developing a super weapon out of a Nevi core. Kat goes against the military, stops the super weapon from destroying Hexaville, and Raven returns on the Ark seemingly from nowhere. Though, this also means that Kat and Raven are now firm friends. It's a fun sequence on its own, asking you to put your abilities to the test one last time, in a mad dash around Venda Center. But Kat ends up saving the day, the credits roll, and it leaves the game feeling rather episodic, with all of the world building and lingering questions left firmly at the door. The sequence in which Kat confronts a seemingly revived Alias in her dreams, and Cyanea appearing in her bed, also ends up going nowhere. I'm really glad they were finally able to tell the rest of this story. we have hindsight regarding the game's development to explain why it ends up feeling truncated. The original Gravity Rush also lacks side quests beyond the challenges, rare Nevi, and those lost travelers you can find strewn about each area of the game. Side quests would only be added to the game in the form of DLC. While these optional activities are awesome, as I've outlined, I always wanted more little stories and moments that build up Kat's character and her reputation with the people of Hexaville. Those were by far my favorite aspects of the game's writing, and I'm happy to say that the DLC quests gave me a taste of that. The DLC added 3 new outfits to the game, and with them came 3 side stories. The first is the Maid Pack. I know, just hearing those words leave my mouth might make it seem like these costumes are going to pander. But you'll soon see that Kat effortlessly slips into each role she fills in these quests, and she totally owns each outfit she wears. Being a maid to this arrogant, dismissive lady, and performing menial tasks for her, is obviously not the most glamorous job, and though she acknowledges this, she stays in character the entire time, which makes it entertaining. Also, she took this job in an effort to repay Ajin and Yuji for the house that she totally sent into the abyss, but it's mostly just so that she can shut them up. But then, when she sees a girl that dropped the money for her sick mother's medicine, she decides that she deserves it more than a drunk dad. Another part of this quest that I really enjoy is the part where Kat has to find the missing pages of a manuscript. It would be straightforward as you read the manuscript bit by bit, but there just so happens to be another manuscript scattered around. At first it's like, okay, this isn't the same story, but then one of the pages you collect has Kat read this excerpt. Feeling clean after her hot, steamy bath, she looked up into my eyes with satisfaction. I saw a thin trail of drool dribbling down her chin. This comes so far out of left field that you kind of want to keep collecting the pages just to see what happens. And as it turns out, Kat seems just as interested. It is now my headcanon that Kat is secretly and privately, let's say, prurient. The second pack is the Spy Pack. Sid is investigating a gang known as the Snake Rabbits, and he asks Kat to go undercover using her abilities and a costume that Sid just happens to have on hand. Wait, this costume? You happen to just have this lying around? Interesting. Again, Kat just kills it in this costume, making it a point to say it looks good on her, and she doesn't exhibit any discomfort in wearing it, despite how ridiculous and intentionally titillating it is. She becomes a spy without a second thought, and upon infiltrating the Snake Rabbits' operation, she joins them and races against them, but she also becomes a part of their family, and gets them to grow up and realize what's most important. It's yet another example of the effect that Kat has on people. Speaking of which, we should talk about Kat's creepy stalker fan. You might not think much of him when you first run into him, but when Alias seemingly returns and plants a bomb in Hexaville, you might notice that he seems a bit more cowardly and powerless than usual. And some of the things you do throughout the quest make him seem obsessed with Kat. Unsurprisingly, this Alias poser ends up being Kat's supposed biggest fan, and you're tasked with bringing him to the police station and placing him under arrest. Even carrying him around is enough for him to feel like he's on cloud 9. Now, you could bring him to the station as usual, but should you be unable to bear being within 5 feet of this guy at all times, you can simply drop him off a cliff and the mission will end in the same way. Such a hilarious detail. I don't have as much to say about the military pack, other than that I think Kat looks cute as hell in this outfit with the braided ponytail and uniform, and the missions themselves contain some of Gravity Rush's most challenging and exciting gameplay. This pack was definitely meant for the hardcore players. From saving stranded civilians during an onslaught of some of the most aggressive Nevi, to putting out fires on the battleship by racing toward nearby water tanks, this is all great fun. More than anything, these quests demonstrated to me the potential for fleshed out side quests in a follow-up to this game, especially ones that further demonstrate Kat's altruistic personality, or perhaps even the social and political climate of the area in question, as did the quests in each district of Hexaville. I truly thought Gravity Rush 2 could be one hell of a special game, should they improve upon everything this game did right. I was already more than willing to vouch for the first game's unique qualities upon finishing it, such as its gameplay, its world, Cat's characterization, its art direction, and the way the game's structure is carried by the mechanics and the events that take place, but I will admit that its abrupt ending and short length made it more of a quintessential purchase when the Vita was still relevant. On the other hand, its short length made it feel as though the core loop of flying around, kicking things, doing challenges, and smiling over every little thing Cat does wasn't ever going to get old. When you consider the context of Gravity Rush being a Vita game, and a fundamentally distinct open-ended Vita game at that, I think it's easier to fall in love with what it accomplishes. That being said, Gravity Rush 2 is where my passion for this series was truly fostered. Development on Gravity Rush 2 began shortly after the completion of the first game, and the team worked diligently on accomplishing what they couldn't before. As they were targeting the PlayStation 4, the team paid close attention to detail in realizing the setting they were crafting, informed by their time promoting the game worldwide, as well as resolving to tell the rest of their intended story. The original game's art director, Yoshiaki Yamaguchi, did not return for Gravity Rush 2, leaving the role in Shunsuke Saito's hands, and his work on this game floored me. In the lead up to the game's release, a two-part OVA called Gravity Rush the Animation was created to bridge the gap between the first and second games, with animation provided by Studio Kara, known for their work on the Evangelion rebuilds. I have a few things to say about this OVA. For one thing, out of all of her appearances across both games and other media, I think this incarnation of Cat is the cutest she has ever looked or behaved. Her expressions, movements, and reactions are all so goddamn adorable. And while there isn't a lot of narrative bridging to speak of in this OVA, aside from hinting at a couple of new characters, and demonstrating how Cat and Sid ended up stranded, it is nice to see Cat, Sid, and Raven interact in any capacity outside of the main games. I will take what I can get with this series. I mean, the first half of this OVA just has Cat fighting a bunch of Nevi for a meat skewer, and I had a big smile on my face the whole time. The action sequences are also beautifully directed, selling the bouncy, snappy nature of combat in the games through deliberately choreographed sequences with excellent use of perspective, weight, dynamic posing, and shot composition. Even the little details of Cat's abilities were captured. When she begins to float upward into the sky, the animators made sure to convey that she doesn't fly, she actually falls upward by having the lower half of her body pulled up by gravity, before the rest of her follows. Anyway, enough of the preamble, let's talk about the game. Gravity Rush 2 begins with a lengthy sequence where you descend into a gravity storm and mine some ore. It looks absolutely nothing like the first game. You even enter first person while in the mine. I like how the distant geometry in the mine is highlighted in green to mask it being rendered in less detail. It reminds me of the same trick that the original game used, only this accentuates Gravity Rush 2's own artistic flourishes, as does the energetic, colorful menu this time around, decorated with silhouettes of Cat fighting in the background. The purpose of this sequence is to demonstrate that Cat is now completely powerless, having lost Dusty in the gravity storm that separated her from Raven, and ending up in the care of the wandering Bonga settlement, working for her meals in the mines and around camp with Sid. Gravity Rush 2's introduction is much slower compared to the original game, but it also gives players far more time to adjust to its controls, sending them back into the mines and empowering them with Cat's abilities in a place where they were once unable to do much of anything, allowing her to prove herself to the settlement just as she proved herself in Hexaville. Upon which they send her into the mines more often to grab some ore and take down hordes of Nevi. Plus, the game is much longer by comparison, so it balances out. Cat has all of her abilities from the first game here, so you'll likely know what to expect, but her core movement has been fine-tuned to exude a sense of weight and momentum. While this loses out on some of the snappiness and responsiveness of the first game, it also sells the feeling of gravity transforming Cat into an unstoppable force with every gravity kick. There have also been some tweaks to make controlling Cat even more enjoyable, including an improved center camera function that flips the world back to its correct orientation every single time, and a significantly improved camera overall thanks to the increase in screen space. The biggest change, however, comes with the stasis field, as you no longer need to stop dead in your tracks to grab things with it, and its range has been increased, which means you can spam the circle button and lob projectiles at things to your heart's content, provided there are objects for you to grab. It honestly makes it the most powerful combat option in the game. You can demolish enemies with your stasis field this time around in the right scenarios, even grabbing debris off of armored enemies and chucking enemy soldiers at other soldiers. It is euphoric. The game plays with momentum further through Kat's new powers, but we'll save those for later. This portion of the game also takes its time to introduce new characters, such as Lisa, the leader of Banga Settlement, who is a no BS business first type of lady, though she is also loyal to her people, and her adoptive daughter Cece, who also arrived mysteriously, much like Kat and Sid. Though Cece is timid and anxious for most of the game, Kat's actions come to inspire her to have more confidence in herself. Sid, on the other hand, seems to be really enjoying not having to be on the force anymore, and he's constantly getting himself out of work by exaggerating his injuries, much to Kat's dismay. There's also Mirai, who is initially skeptical over Kat's newfound respect in the settlement, but when she is such a great help in the mines and completely wipes out the Nevi in front of him, Mirai develops feelings for Kat and seems disappointed about the idea of her leaving for Hexaville someday. I get it, man. That's just the effect that Kat seems to have on people. All of this comes to a head when Vogo of Sun Shipping appears, whom Lisa has been selling the ore to in order to scrounge together whatever she can for her people. Vogo attempts to give them a pretty raw deal, and threatens to tell the council about the gems Banga pocketed from the Forbidden Lands should they lose a wager. Vogo's brother Fee competes with Kat to see who can take down the most targets in a best 2 out of 3 competition. But Vogo cheats just as Kat is about to win. Since Shunsuke Saito is such a great character designer, as soon as I saw Fee, I was able to predict his nature would detest the foul play his brother committed. And I was able to predict that he would be a master at Kung Fu. Of all the new characters introduced in Gravity Rush 2, Fee was easily my favorite, as it led to the coolest final boss this chapter of the game could have possibly had. A sparring match between him and Kat. The objective is simple. Hit Fee enough times to have him drop a bell, without being able to use any gravity powers. The tug of war comes from him hitting you back, causing the meter to shift in his favor, and as the rounds go on, he won't pull any punches. He's fast and clever, and you'll need to grow accustomed to the timings of his various attacks, and make split-second dodges. Watching him block and deflect Kat's blows as you build your meter up is so much fun. The battle is intense, considering it has little to do with what you've learned so far, and it is a brilliant showcase of this game's highly detailed and expertly implemented animation. I suppose now would be a great time to discuss the animation of Gravity Rush. Both of these games have top-notch animation, but Gravity Rush 2 is on another level. Shifting gravity has such a visceral feel to it, particularly because it blends a physics simulation with Kat's hair, scarf, and limbs with handcrafted animations, much like Shadow of the Colossus or Eco. But then you have Kat's ground-based combo, which is such a varied and energetic series of kicks and punches, and watching Fee deflect all of these hits in a myriad of ways just makes the game feel like you're playing an anime come to life. When we discuss games that capture the feel of anime, we often talk about cel shading or deliberate stylistic decisions. But something I respect just as much is the attention to detail in animation. Be it Guilty Gear's rigging witchcraft that allows them to achieve smear frames and distortion, typical of traditional animation, or the use of perspective and lighting tricks seen in the Ultimate Ninja Storm games, animation is just as important to the visual identity of these games as their graphics, and Gravity Rush understands this well. Jumping ahead a bit, check out this dual finisher between Kat and Raven, which uses forced perspective in aggressive moments just to make you feel awesome about having taken down this boss. Best of all, Shunsuke Saito is credited for having animated Kat himself. He was able to imbue his passion for Kung Fu into Kat's movements, going beyond just crafting her look to being able to envision the way she moves too. I aspire to have that amount of skill in realizing a character that vividly. This chapter of the game establishes Kat's reputation across the settlement in a similar manner to the beginning portion of the first game, and it also deliberately holds you back from being able to freely explore a giant city, so that by the time you finally reach that city, it's incredibly exciting. And this is one hell of a city they've created. Inspired by their time in Southeast Asia, Jirga Power Lao is an absolute paradise for the gameplay of Gravity Rush, featuring an upbeat, groovy track by Kohei Tanaka, embodying the liveliness of the city through guitars, brass, an assortment of drums, and even a piano. The city has a wide variety of colors, baked in the lived-in griminess of a heavily frequented market. There's attention to detail in its various stalls and buildings, and the people buying things, meeting friends, listening to music and whatnot. But then, if you leave the marketplace, you'll find floating islands packed with skyscrapers to fly through and walk on. Naturally, this place is filled with gems and treasure chests to find, and thanks to the size of this place, you bet your ass I got lost in exploring this place to level up Kat's abilities, just as before. This part of Jirga Power Lao, known as Le Kolmozna, is the beating heart of it all. The working class live here in the center of commerce. Its size alone staggered me, and the missions here take you all over the place, using Le Kolmozna to its fullest extent. But then there's a mission that has you investigating a gang, and you're informed that you should head down beneath the clouds. As it turns out, there's a whole other district below, Le Elgona, but it feels much different in atmosphere. The music is dour, color is muted or otherwise absent, and the houseboats are made from whatever scraps they could find. This is where Jirga Power Lao's impoverished citizens are forced to live. Conversely, there's a district for the rich above Le Kolmozna called Le Havina, and it feels like Disneyland up there. There's a gorgeous pool in the center, mansions as far as the eye can see, and the music makes it seem like they've achieved complete paradise. Each of these districts are fully featured, by the way. They all contain missions, gems, and their own distinct narratives. And on top of all of this, there's a massive battleship above even Le Havina, with its own challenges to face. On its own, the verticality of Jirga Power Lao lends itself extraordinarily well to the already compelling gameplay of Gravity Rush. Controlling Kat as she darts through the city or falls between buildings to reach other districts feels unbelievable. It feels like something you'd only bear witness to in a film, and yet it is fully interactive. You have agency over everything you're watching right now. It also serves a dual purpose, being a striking visual metaphor for the division of social and financial classes, and the game makes it a point to explore this division, as well as the complexities of resolving it through its various missions. The gang that you are sent to investigate, the Angry Centipede, happens to be stealing shipments out of Le Kolmozna to feed and supply the people of Elgona. Meanwhile, the rich get to sit pretty and enjoy comfort in their wealth while everyone else works for them. And the oppression goes even further, as the military is forcing the people of Elgona to remain where they are in order to maintain the status quo. Seeing their plight and vouching for their character, Kat makes the decision to help them out in the end by donating the gems she's been earning. It would take more than this to resolve the injustice Elgona is facing, but it's a great start. The real insurrection comes when Kat frees Raven from the military's mind control, and after Lisa has a change of heart over Kat's selfless actions, everyone comes together to retake control of Jirga Power Lao. Raven herself has a much closer relationship with Kat in this game, teaming up with her during main story missions to assist her in combat through cooperative actions, helping her out with stealth takedowns, and there's even a side mission where she helps Kat go mining, only to pick up on the flow of mining effortlessly and make Kat just a little jealous. And in the end, she lets Kat win. It's really sweet, and it gives Raven some space to mature outside of the central narrative. Of course, Kat continues to inspire everyone she meets. Only this time, you can make a tangible impact by pursuing dozens of side missions. Building on the DLC missions in the first game, your appreciation for Gravity Rush 2, as in being able to examine how the class divide impacts citizens and seeing how Kat can positively impact them all, as well as diving further into the design of the game and having a good time, is all strengthened by how many side missions you check out. Not to mention, a lot of them are genuinely funny and memorable in their own right, even if they don't have larger implications on the world. You don't have to play all of them before you finish the game, as going down a checklist and doing all of these missions will probably lead to you burning out, a casualty of structuring the game like this, but a lot of them are entertaining, and they lead you to unlocking further side quests, additional features, and challenges. Now, there are way too many side missions in this game to talk about, so I'll just mention some of my favorites. For one thing, this game has delivery missions in which you need to use your abilities to deliver newspapers and cargo as fast as possible. Another delivery mission I like, though it isn't of the same design, is where you have to deliver a particularly stinky package all the way up to Le Havina. So much so that if Kat doesn't take a break and put the package down, then she will pass out from the stench. Not only is the concept hilarious, but it also tests your abilities in a unique and fun manner. Yet another delivery mission has you delivering a package for Vogo that he is very discreet about, and the reactions from the recipients seem to imply that you are delivering illegal drugs. Even Raven seems to be addicted, and she'll give you a really hard time when you try to finish your delivery. As it turns out, they're cakes, not drugs. Sugar is dangerous. The Spoils of War side quest gave me a hard time on my first playthrough. You're supposed to assist the Angry Centipede in stealing supplies from the military, but you can't let them know you're there. You have to throw these crates overboard carefully, making sure you quickly take down anyone that spots you, and making sure you have no witnesses to those takedowns. This unlocks a challenge in which you have to recover as much cargo as you can within a time limit. There's a mission in which you have to help Fee defend a shipment for Vogo, and this is where I began to truly see the power of the stasis field in this game. You can throw soldiers into each other, violently hurl them at walls with a staggering amount of force, and even launch them off the boat and let them fall to their demise. Allegedly. I mean, you never see a body when they fall down there. I'm sure someone will catch them. Kat doesn't seem like a murderer to me. I should also mention that despite the stasis field being so powerful, you can't charge your special meter if you rely solely on throwing things at enemies. In order to charge it, you need to attack enemies regularly. Plus, you'll run out of objects eventually. While it might seem like you can spam it, that won't be the case forever. There are a multitude of missions you can take on upon returning to Hexaville as well. My absolute favorite, without question, is the mission where you need to drum up business for a nearby food stall. Not just because I think Kat looks super cute in the outfit she wears here, but because it goes from aggressively handing out flyers by using the gravity slide around town, to you rapidly throwing customers into the food stall with your stasis field. These missions and challenges had me dying of laughter when I first played them, and it's yet another example of Kat just slipping into whatever role a mission has in store for her. There's a series of missions where you act in a film about a battle nurse, which is as ridiculous as it sounds, but Kat still gives it her all and performs stunts for the camera. There's a mission where you have to go undercover as an idol, upon which you will be hounded by a massive crowd of adoring fans, and you have to shake them all without using your gravity powers. There's even a mission in which you have to disguise as someone working for the bars across Plejun to dissuade Ajin from drinking, and instead spend time with his son. And boy does he book it for those bars. He'll even fake you out when attempting to pick one. I could go on about the side missions in this game, but that's just because they are delightfully charming. That said, there's also something else I need to mention. With the sheer number of side quests available in this game, I'd completely understand if there were people out there that felt this game was overwhelming and bloated in comparison to the solid focus of the first game. There are also quite a few side quests that just kind of exist. They don't have the most compelling gameplay concepts, they aren't that funny or memorable, and they slow the pace of the game down to a crawl. The stealth and tailing missions, for example, are mostly awful, and while you can be creative in your approach on some occasions, they are by far the worst missions in the game. I'll give credit to the side missions that are boring in a gameplay sense, but stick with you once you complete them, like the one where you have to investigate this cult that points to the sky when they see Nevi, only for the game to reveal that it was basically a giant flash mob. You can always cancel a side mission if you're not enjoying it, but hey, I've completed 2 100% runs of this game. It begs the question, why do I pursue these side missions even when I find them dull? The short answer is, I just love seeing Kat help people. These quests could be the most drab, repetitive things in the world, and it helps that there are great quests in this game, of course, but they are all written to paint a picture of the good that Kat is doing for the world she finds herself in. Helping this father accept her daughter's boyfriend into the family, reuniting a man with his elderly mother, helping a boy from above meet with his friend in Elgona after learning he's gone missing, making the choice to save a boy's sister over a rich, grumpy old man, and perhaps my absolute favorite example, the dog side mission. From a gameplay perspective, this mission is a big nothing burger. You're taking this woman's dog Zoe for a walk, as she seems to have lost her favorite toy. Zoe has a mind of her own, and she will mostly listen to your commands, but it's sort of a shot in the dark as to when you are ever going to find her toy. Then you find a little girl who wants to keep the toy for herself, but that's only because she wanted to play with Zoe, as her mother won't allow her to have a dog. So for the rest of this mission, you're playing fetch. It can take some time to get used to the controls, but it's not so bad. Throughout this entire mission, a unique music track plays. This piece does not show up anywhere else in the game, to my knowledge, and I love how serene it sounds. It sells the atmosphere of this whole mission. In all of its mundanity, I found that this mission ended up being one of my favorites. Perhaps it had to do with the fact that my childhood dog passed away shortly before I played this game for the first time, but I think my attachment to those daily walks we took, the repetitive motions, the same old routes, is what made me love this mission in the end. I would give anything to take her for a walk one more time, and this mission got to me. It stripped all of Kat's powers away and demonstrated that she doesn't necessarily need them to bring people joy. It all stems from who she is on the inside. It also demonstrates the power that a pet has when it comes to relieving stress, and reminds me of the simpler things that make life so beautiful. The best part about doing these quests is that you can talk to the people you've helped after finishing them, making the world feel even more alive and being a tangible representation of Kat's impact on people. All of these side missions reward you with not just new challenges to take on for gems, but also talismans, which can have a significant impact on your performance. Talismans are a mechanic that you don't really have to interact with in order to finish the game, but they can be essential to your survival and capabilities on hard difficulty, as well as the game's tougher challenges. While the talismans you receive from side missions have set abilities, you can also pick up random talismans from your trips into the mines, and you can freely explore the mines upon completing the Anchors Away side missions. At Pandora's Fortunes in Hexaville, you can fuse certain talismans together and recycle them in order to create talismans with a variety of abilities, or talismans that stack specific abilities to increase their effect. These abilities could be increasing the strength of your gravity kick, draining health from enemies when you attack them, increasing the amount of things you can carry in a stasis field, the list goes on. There are so many talismans that you can strategize with for a variety of situations. There are also talismans that enhance Kat's new powers, which we should definitely discuss, because they are so much fun to mess around with. Throughout the main missions, you'll obtain new powers that not only allow you to approach enemies differently, but also drastically adjust your weight, allowing you to pull off some pretty cool movement. You'll find these in mining areas similar to the rift planes from the first game. The first is Lunar Style, which makes you light as a feather, allowing you to spring jump high into the air, leap forward like a panther at high speeds, and your attacks will lock onto and bounce off of enemies. Your gravity kick will transform into a warping kick combo that does less damage, but is excellent for tracking fast flying enemies. And your mid-air dodges will give you far more wiggle room to float to distant platforms. On the path to the final boss of the Jirga Power Lao chapter, you'll obtain the Jupiter Style, which makes you weigh as much as an anvil, but your punches and gravity kicks will hit like a wrecking ball or a heat-seeking missile respectively, allowing you to decimate armored enemies, and your dodges will allow you to deflect enemy attacks too. Jupiter Style also drastically speeds up your gravity slide, but your handling will take a hit. So if you switch between styles while sliding, you can actually gain a lot more control over your movements while still moving really fast. These styles also inherit the additional special attacks from the first game. Switching between these styles on the fly to explore for gems across both cities proved to be endlessly engaging. Paired with the staggeringly detailed animation, the feeling of being able to influence not just the direction of gravity, but also your own momentum when going against it, made me feel indescribably powerful. I am not kidding when I say I spent hours just playing with Kat's powers and collecting gems, ignoring missions and whatnot, just to enjoy my time in this world and level up her abilities. This game is the perfect marriage of Kat's personality, her strong sense of justice, kindness, and her inspirational ability to overcome any bad situation with a positive attitude, and a freeing sense of movement that allows you to bend gravity to your will, unlike any game I've ever played. So, if you want an answer as to why I trudge through the weaker aspects of both of these games, that's why. When it comes to talismans and Kat's new powers, I feel like you can truly get the most out of them if you attempt to fight the secret bosses in each mine, as well as if you dive into the Delvul Trench Mine. This mine is a challenge dungeon that tests you on various abstract and specific concepts, and it contains some of the hardest challenges out of anything Gravity Rush has ever implemented, forcing you to use specific techniques to take out enemies quickly, within a strict time limit, without taking damage, and even unique objectives like taking pictures with certain enemies, or defeating enemies by letting them attack each other. All of this with some of the toughest enemies you'll ever face, and a boss rush at the end. Initially, this dungeon only had 30 floors, but a post-launch update added 20 more. And I still haven't cleared those last 20 floors. I'm pretty damn good at this game by now, but I don't have a clue how to beat layer 34. I'm sure I'll do it someday and complete my love for this series, but just managing to overcome the first 30 floors gave me such a sense of accomplishment, and only solidified my love for the gameplay of Gravity Rush. Plus, you get some of the most powerful talismans in the entire game by clearing these floors, so it's worth a shot. When it comes to side content, there's one last mechanic that I want to talk about. I mentioned one of the floors had you taking pictures with the Nevi, right? Well, photography has a large presence in Gravity Rush 2. Not just in certain main and side missions, but also because you can go on a scavenger hunt for paintings and people across both Chirga Powerlau and Hexaville. As far as I know, completing these only gets you a trophy, but it gave me an excuse to examine each city thoroughly based on the hints it gave me. And I found even more gems by doing this, so I had a blast. If anything, the photography mechanic allowed me to create memories with this game's various moments and costumes. And it's a crying shame that Sony took the servers for this game offline after only a year and a half. Essentially, you could share your photos with the world and take on photo challenges and be rewarded with Dusty tokens for additional costumes and talismans, all of which are now unobtainable. Any game with photography as a mechanic, one that encourages you to use good framing, or at the very least take cool photos as part of a scavenger hunt for rewards, is a good game in my book. It played a huge part in making Beyond Good and Evil's world so fun to explore, and Gravity Rush 2 is no exception to that. My favorite side mission to make use of photography is this one, where you have to help this boy complete his grandfather's scavenger hunt by finding the locations in each photo, with each location having special memories attached to them. It's both a beautiful way of connecting with a place that has been ingrained in players' minds since the first game, and a touching story of the bond these two shared. All of this makes Gravity Rush 2 a far richer world to dive headfirst into, and one that I had a hard time leaving when all was said and done. But we should take a look at the main game from here on out. Fighting soldiers and giant mechs with Kat's abilities is an absolute blast, but once I reached New Heralion and had to take on this giant hulking mass of buildings and other structures, I was astonished by the sense of scale they achieved with this battle. Hunting for all of the weak points on something of this size is a daunting task, as when you're up close to it and it moves around, it genuinely feels like the world around you is shifting and tilting out of your control. On top of that, it loves to blow you away and suck you in. It's a kind of disorientation that I felt was thrilling, rather than nauseating. Much like the feeling of falling up when you think the sky is above you, only for you to realize that it's below you. It's genuinely a one-of-a-kind sensation that I feel is only possible in this game. And when you finally get through this part, you'll have to dive into it and take down its mechanical core, all while it attempts to track you down with lasers. The Council had taken CC, Lisa, and Sid as prisoners, along with other hostages in order to stop the insurrection that was taking place, and Kat and Raven were forced to investigate the Lost City for them. Kat and Raven free the hostages themselves after the Council doesn't uphold their end of the deal, and decide to keep the rift to the Lost City open for their own selfish purposes, leading to an insurrection led by Lisa. This, however, leads to New Heralion mutating into the giant city monster I just described, wiping out the council in the process. Yes, the central antagonists of Jirga Paralao destroyed themselves in their pursuit of power, demonstrating the triviality of this government and leading Kat to evacuate as many people as she can before she and Raven can take on this manifestation of a power vacuum the council created. While the Jirga Paralao chapter of the game takes a political angle from which to examine existing in a world full of injustice, Hexaville takes a philosophical approach to that notion, and according to Dr. Brahman, that injustice is time itself. After Kat is thrown into another rift, separating her from her friends once more, she lands in Hexaville just as she wanted, though she is now more alone than ever before, and the city has changed dramatically with the use of new technology and surveillance methods. Apparently, Kat now even has to register as a citizen before she can even live in a sewer pipe. A sewer pipe, for God's sake! Forcing her to look around for a place to stay in a city that once revered her for her efforts. There's also a new superhero in town known as Callie Angel, and she seems to have replaced Kat in every way. Things start to make more sense upon meeting this red-haired guy who mentions his daughter falling ill, and he doesn't seem to have the time or privacy to honor her favorite things. As you help show him around town, he'll ask Kat questions about what matters most to her in life. You can answer these questions however you like, and he doesn't seem like all that bad of a guy. As it turns out, he happens to be Dr. Brahman, the scientist that designed Hexaville's defense system, and Officer Chaz ends up hooking Kat up with her old sewer pipe after she lends him a hand. But there are still a lot of mysteries about him. As an aside, you can actually decorate Kat's pipe house in this game with furniture you obtain from side missions. A minor detail, but one that continues the trend of fun personalization in this game, accentuated by Kat's various costumes, all of which she positively slays in. Seriously, it's uncanny how good she looks with 2B's hair and outfit. It is revealed that Dr. Brahman discovered a method of slowing the flow of time, and, in order to potentially keep his daughter alive after she fell ill, he accidentally slowed time to such an extent that she appeared frozen to everyone else, trapping her in limbo. He decides to enact a plan to freeze time for everyone, so that he may preserve the world and its people forever. He needs Kat's help in order to enact this plan, as he needs a second angel in addition to Callie. But of course, Kat refuses. Now, the rest of this narrative has a few contrivances and Deus Ex Machinas written into it. After Chaz manages to unearth footage of Brahman freezing one of his associates, the general public turns against him. Raven and Cece appear in Hexaville as if from nowhere, and Cece is revealed to have at some point been that other angel that Brahman experimented on. But after this part of the story ends, Cece becomes one with her personality and memories. I don't know, it comes out of nowhere. Lisa also shows up with all of Jirga Paralao from a rift during the finale, and her arrival makes absolutely no sense, though she does hint at a message from Alias at some point. Really, this only happens so that you can travel between the two cities to complete a 100% run before the final chapter. It's thinly plotted nonsense if you ask me, but I also admire its relevance to the game's central thesis in the end. Plus, the final missions in Hexaville were lots of fun. Let's talk about both of those things. Defending the city from incoming missiles by throwing them into the abyss, homing in on the special forces, battling Unica and Permet as they attempt to warn Kat of the truth behind Dr. Brahman's intentions, battling Callie Angel on the ground after she goes absolutely bonkers from Kat's rejection of her adoptive father's plan, and the battle with Callie and Durga high in the skies above Venda Center, all felt like I was bashing action figures into one another, which again is intended as a massive compliment. Only this time, I had so many different abilities to experiment with in order to fight back, and the action figures are all pretty girls. Look, I'm an adult, I pay my taxes, I can play whatever I want. After another Rift Plane level that happens to be the best place to grind for gems should you want that 60,000 gem trophy, you'll unlock Kat's Panther form, which, once charged after a certain period of time, allows you to track enemies effortlessly, heal damage you've taken, and slash away at anything nearby. This Rift Plane level also forces you to exclusively use your alternate forms, testing you on their unique properties like their weight and their stasis field projectiles having different effects, like being able to throw a giant ball of debris or hitting enemies multiple times. After all of this comes the final battle. First, you fight Durga and Callie, freeing Cece, but Callie ends up mutating after being unable to accept that Brahman's plan would not come to fruition. The end result is, good God, what the hell is that? This thing was a hell of a surprise to come across on my first playthrough. This looks like something Kentaro Miura would have drawn for Berserk, only we get to see it animated and in living color. The flesh also brings to mind the end of Akira, which I'm sure influenced the team somehow. The creepiest part about it is that the many faces it has all express emotion as you attack in excruciating detail. But that's not to mention the other disgusting aspects. The undulating flesh, the massive limbs protruding outward, the weak points that pulse a bright red, the sickly pinkish flesh tone they chose, the veins you can observe as you get close, and the hollow faces that cry out in pain. I think this boss might be a masterpiece of horror. Shoutouts to whoever on the team designed this form for Callie. I was thoroughly disturbed. During the game's very obviously fake credits roll, I still have no idea why they did this, Sid is still missing, and the game is very obviously not over, Brahman witnesses the horrific impact he had on his adoptive daughter, and lamenting what time had stolen from him as he bleeds out, accepts that the inevitability of time and death is what would eventually unite him and his daughter. His death is honestly quite harrowing for a game that was akin to a shonen action series, though I guess the game did just attempt full-on body horror. Even so, Brahman's arc, though a bit shaky from a writing perspective toward the end, still managed to sell that time, though an inevitability, is essential to fostering dreams and change as it moves forward, just as Kat told Brahman herself. Attempting to fight back against the flow of time is as ineffectual as trying to reject the flow of gravity. Speaking of which, in the final chapter, Kat receives a mysterious message from a shining girl, informing her that the world as she knows it will be destroyed by a dark ocean beneath Hexaville. Kat and Raven travel up the world pillar, and upon reaching the top, it became clear that the team were about to finally conclude Kat's story. Kat and Raven are welcomed into the frozen city of Eto, upon which they meet a little boy, and something strange happens. A music box plays the intro melody to the first game, something that becomes a prominent leitmotif in Gravity Rush 2. Let's talk about one of my favorite moments involving Kat in this game. In one of the story missions, Kat is tasked with infiltrating the Bismalia fortress. While doing so, she is mistaken for someone else out of absolutely nowhere, dragged into a dressing room, and is thrust onto the stage in front of a large crowd wearing a red dress with her hair in a side ponytail. If you know Kat by now, you should know what happens next. She recalls lyrics to a song, and absolutely owns these unexpected circumstances by singing flawlessly in front of the crowd. She sings a familiar song, and it continues to play throughout the game. To me, it perfectly captures Kat's personality in a single song, but its lyrics don't make a lot of sense at that point in the game. But they don't necessarily need to. Kat is that red apple that fell from the sky. And all that matters now is that Kat is absolutely killing it, at least until soldiers recognize her as the gravity shifter, upon which she just needs to start fighting them off as usual. It's such a great moment. I love this character so much. In this new, unfamiliar context, however, she is Queen Alua, calling back to that cryptic sequence from the first game and giving longtime fans of this series that have stuck with it since the Vita some satisfying answers. And it only gets better from here. While she's here, she has to continually attend an audience with her people. You'll be able to watch as she listens to their worries, and you'll receive hints about what might be going on around here, but all you can really do is pick up on their dialogue and investigate your room in order to break this loop. This whole sequence really reminded me of an old school adventure game, and it is a phenomenal way to structure such a massive plot revelation. You might discover a story here about a little girl trapped in a tower, and this is where you can begin to put the pieces together. At night, a window will be left ajar, and you'll find a key, with which you have to unlock a drawer and find a music box. You'll have to listen to the people of Eto ramble about how wonderful it is up there, and how this dark ocean will take thousands of years to kill them, so they don't have to worry about anything else. But one night you'll hear that familiar song once more, coming from the music box you discovered. You'll wander outside and see Raven at the bottom of a spiral staircase, being held captive so that Kat, or rather Queen Alua, may stay with her people forever. In the throne room is a man named Cicero and Alias. Interesting. This little boy ends up being the mastermind behind this whole thing, whatever that thing might be, and he awakens a massive, brightly shining girl from a crystal after Kat is cast into a maze of blocks in order to recover her memories, thanks to a third creator named Bit. As you solve these puzzles just as you did in the first game, it really feels like you embody Kat here, putting the pieces of her memories back together, both figuratively and literally. Sid, who did not return with Raven and the others, reappears in Kat's memories of all places. Kat, in her time as Alua, demonstrates a desire to save the people below Eto from their fate, and Sid is revealed to have been beside her back then, advising her. Sid says farewell before the final memory plays out, and we learn that Cicero betrayed Kat and Sid, stabbing Sid in the back and forcing Kat to plummet to an uncertain fate. Bit bestows her guardian upon her, Dusty, and we are all caught up. Even in these panels, you can feel Kat's anger. She is teeming with rage, and the creators guide her, for the last time, back to Hexaville. Meanwhile, Raven is forced to take up the mantle in Kat's absence, and you actually get to play as her. She differs from Kat in that her gravity kicks are more of a gravity combo, and her stasis field allows her to use SP to summon projectiles without any objects present. You get to use the same abilities that she once used on Kat in the first game, in order to defeat the Shining Girl that was summoned, known as Electricity, all while this triumphant music track plays in the background. It's an awesome power fantasy, until Electricity multiplies herself, and Raven realizes that her attacks have no effect. Kat arrives in Hexaville, bearing witness to complete and utter devastation. Unica, Permet, and Raven all lie motionless on the ground, and Hexaville is in shambles. Kat is not best pleased. Imagine taking this absolute pure, selfless bundle of joy that once inspired everyone around her, and putting her through the worst trauma she's ever experienced as everything she's come to love crumbles around her. Realistically, anyone would lose their cool. And for the first time, we get to experience Kat's anger. Sanae Kobayashi, Kat's voice actress, gives a powerful performance in this moment. It's the first time Kat has ever demonstrated such raw, unbridled rage, and you can feel it. She sounds like a completely different person. It's honestly moving. This phase of the fight boils down to you being able to track the real copy of Electricity, denoted by her slightly different color. You get to stay in Panther mode at first as Kat is furious here, and it's empowering to actually cut her down. In comes this little boy once again, whose name is Kai by the way, and he hails from the same royal family as Kat. He mocks Kat's efforts as the fight moves into its second phase. This phase of the fight has you dodging Electricity by redirecting the lightning strikes to tall objects, in addition to finding the real copy and fighting it while in your normal form, all while Electricity laughs maniacally at you. This straight up felt like a shonen manga power fantasy. It is the culmination of this series' gameplay, and by far the hardest fight to overcome out of the game's main missions. But if you get into a rhythm of being able to track the real copy, and using your Panther form wisely, you will eventually overcome it. Kai mentions wanting to remake the world by wiping out everyone in it, so that Eto may be free of that dark ocean forever. Upon hearing this, Kat gives us the greatest moment out of either of these games. God, I hate this little bastard. Kai fuses with his guardian to become a colossal monster, looking like a summon out of a Final Fantasy game. And even though Kat is struck down, she does what she's always done. She gets back up. She does what she can to weaken it, even with Bonga arriving to help out, but it gradually strips away Kat's powers to the point where she can no longer shift gravity and she is on the brink of death. She is told to accept the demise of everything she has come to love, and told to welcome the concept of eternal prosperity, for her specifically, if she leaves everything behind. But then, the people of Hexaville sing a familiar tune. Under any other circumstances, I would have found this moment unbelievably corny. But this was all for Kat. The same character I found endearing because she was able to make a home out of a sewer pipe. The same character that made friends with gang members in order to resolve their problems and attempt to make peace during a phase of social division. The same character that turned an awkward moment on stage into one of the most memorable moments in this game. The same character whose altruism never took a break because she felt like it was the right thing to do, and making others happy made her happy. No questions asked. She just wanted to do the right thing, because she values this strange world she fell into so much. And hearing an entire chorus sing her song in that same fictional gibberish language, all for a character I'd come to love, it got me choked up. But it just goes to show that the compassion and kindness you demonstrate in this world does come back around. Gravity might be a constant force, one that ensures you fall when you get knocked off of your feet. But Kat gets back up every time. And now, as an act of thanks, the world inspires her to stand one last time. But what is this world? Is it really worth protecting? Throughout the game, it is made clear the world is a cruel and unjust place, with many of its issues reflective of our own. Marginalized communities are forced to take drastic action, while the rich sit comfortably above, getting richer by the day and turning a blind eye to those in need. Those in power force their ideals on everyone else, maintaining the status quo in the pursuit of power, as demonstrated by the council, or forcing their unfair view of an ideal world for their own selfish, warped desires, as demonstrated by Brahman. Kat showed us what makes the world worth living in. Its people. She valued the life that she had carved out for herself so much that she would do anything to ensure the safety of the countless other lives that surround her every day. She listened to their hopes and dreams, understanding the value of having something to look forward to, and decided that she would do anything to protect them. Anyone has the power to be that person, regardless of whether or not you can shift gravity. And that's why I'm glad that, as Kat, I decided to help people throughout the game. I'm glad I helped Zoe and that little girl play together. I'm glad I helped Yuji get his father to spend more time with him. I'm glad I shot that ridiculous movie as the battle nurse, or became a part of the Snake Rabbits, or gave the Angry Centipede a chance. There is good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. After Sid reveals himself to have been Alias this whole time, having controlled the Nevi, guided Kat, and been revived by the creators before their final sacrifice, he asks Kat one last thing. Do you have to go? Kat says she does, adding that she'd do anything to protect this world. Kat sacrifices herself to close the black hole before it can consume the world. The game even references the first line of dialogue in the series, "There was another way," bringing Kat's story to a bittersweet end, but one that I'd be lying if I said I didn't love. Raven picks up where Kat left off, taking care of problems across the city and saying hello to all of Kat's friends. If there's anyone that Kat inspired most of all, it's Raven. Of course, some inquire about how Raven is handling her grief, and though she doesn't say much, you can tell that she is suffering. She lost her best friend, her partner. She's even hearing a cat meowing now. What's that about? The game gives you one last glimmer of hope that Kat might still be alive in this final shot with Raven, but with how neatly Kat's story ended, I felt the sense of finality made it all the more beautiful. Just as gravity is an unyielding, guaranteed force on this planet, so is time. And Kat's time has come to an end.
Pécile et non. Du la semua, on se vit et tout.
Even though I only played these games recently, this team created a character that I instantly fell in love with, and a strong mechanical core that made nearly every action you take in this game endlessly enthralling and emphatically empowering. Its structure might leave some rough patches here and there, but with the world they'd crafted across both games, I could forgive its problems, both in game design and writing. Gravity Rush 2 would ultimately be one of Japan Studios' last major projects, as its employees would either depart entirely or join Team Asobi when it was spun off as its own studio in 2021. And to be honest, Sony never deserved their talents. In fact, they still don't. Japan Studios' games have all demonstrated a remarkable degree of creativity and originality, and they've established several iconic games for PlayStation and assisted in the development of many others, some of which you've definitely played. But the commercial performance of their original projects seldom make any headlines. Other than the PlayStation Vita, where Gravity Rush was one of the system's best sellers due to it being a compelling launch title, Japan Studios' original games almost never sell over 1 million units, with the only exceptions to this being Ape Escape, The Legend of Dragoon, and Shadow of the Colossus, each of them just barely breaking 1 million. By contrast, PlayStation's best-selling first-party games have all been similar in terms of gameplay and structure since the PS3, and oh boy do they sell well. This narrow focus has led to each of the games of this ilk making Sony a lot of money, but it also means that there isn't a whole lot of variety on the platform today, compared to the PlayStation 1 or 2 era. Mind you, I'm talking exclusively about first-party games here. They also have a much stronger appeal worldwide, whereas Japan Studio made games for an audience that just didn't exist as much on PlayStation. Nintendo, on the other hand, is responsible for publishing not just one of the best-selling action-adventure games of all time, but also one of the best-selling 3D platformers, the best-selling tactical role-playing game and racing game, and one of the best-selling multiplayer shooters. And even if they aren't bestsellers, they still fare excellently on the Nintendo Switch, simply because the install base for the console loves creative and fun games above all else. Not to mention their games appeal to a wider demographic. For the longest time, it felt like Japan Studio was forced to grapple with being that kind of studio, developing for a platform that didn't necessarily reward them or Sony for their work. I have no doubt in my mind that if their games were created for an audience that fully embraced their ideas, Japan Studio would still be around today. Today, Keiichiro Toyama works at his own studio, and recently released the action-horror fusion of Slitterhead. Shunsuke Saito continued to draw Cat and Raven on his Twitter account after the release of Gravity Rush 2, entertaining fan requests and whatnot and creating some of my favorite pieces of Cat. But ever since leaving Japan Studio, he hasn't drawn her as much. He still publishes his original artwork, which I love, and apparently he follows me on both Twitter and Blue Sky. Probably because I sent him a tweet telling him how much I loved his work on these games. Currently he is working on a top-secret project that isn't Gravity Rush 3, but I know for a fact that whatever he comes up with will be a joy to experience. Even so, I hope that he knows that his work will always be valued, even if it never achieves the popularity of the Beatles or something. But that's what I love about the work this team accomplished. I admire Japan Studio because they have always worked on the projects that they were interested in, first and foremost. Having that much freedom as an artist and being able to realize the worlds in your mind sounds liberating. And so, with the time I have left, in a world where death and gravity are both guaranteed, I will continue to make exactly what I want to make. And while I'm at it, just as I have dreams of my own, I realize that others do as well. They want to see them come true just as much. I don't see why I shouldn't help make things easier for them where I can. That kindness comes back around. But I won't preach to you about kindness any longer. In fact, I shouldn't have to. I'm sure Kat did a fine enough job of convincing you, as she did me. Thanks for giving this video a chance. Your support has given me the opportunity to talk about the things I love, and that's what I'll continue to do. If you'd like to see more, I'll once again recommend the 2-hour compilation of interviews I conducted with fans of Chrono Trigger from my previous video, as they gave me a ton of insight during the writing process. We comb over every aspect of the game just so that I can gain perspective on its various facets, including the battle system, their favorite moments and memories, Akira Toriyama's character design, and so much more. There's also Jacob Geller's video on Peggle, yes, seriously, as well as my good friend King K's videos on Astrobot and gambling in video games. You can find all of this on Nebula, a creator-owned streaming platform that hosts a wide variety of exclusive, ad-free videos from creators like me, like narrative fiction, video essays, documentaries, and so much more. By signing up, you'll be able to see videos first on Nebula before they release anywhere else, as well as watch exclusive videos such as extended cuts, bonus videos, and original works, and watching videos on Nebula directly supports creators. My videos always release at least 24 hours early on Nebula. If you subscribe, you'll also obtain guest passes, 1 per month for monthly subscribers, and 3 per quarter for annual and lifetime subscribers, if you'd like to give someone else a chance to check it out. Nebula has continued to be supportive in my journey to write about the things I love, and if you'd like to check it out, you can use my link, go.nebula.tv/LiamTriforce, to get 40% off an annual subscription. That's $36 a year, or $3 a month. You can also purchase a lifetime subscription to Nebula for $300 that sticks around so long as you do. Thank you so much for the consideration. I've been Liam Triforce, thanks for watching.